Welcome on in. This is the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, John McKechnie. That is Mario Puig. It is the week between conference championships and the Super Bowl, so no games this weekend, but we still have a ton to get to. We're going to look ahead to this upcoming NFL draft. We're also going to break down some of the coaching news from around the league and give our initial leans on Super Bowl 60, which will be featuring, of course, the Patriots and the Seahawks coming up next Sunday. But let's kick things off in the coaching world. We've had a couple more vacancies filled since we last talked, Mario. Looks like Joe Brady is going to be the guy in Buffalo. We've got Robert Saleh going to the Titans, and we've got Todd Monken going to the Browns. So I'll kind of let you lead it as far as who you wanted to dig into first, but I figured all three of these guys worth mentioning here in this pod here.
Yeah, Joe Brady to Buffalo makes the firing of Sean McDermott almost more like a coup against Sean McDermott at this point make more sense, because and it also looks better for Brandon Beane, because if Brandon Beane had to fire McDermott and Brady just to go back to Brian Daboll, it'd be very transparently setting the team back organizationally 4 or 5 years or whatever, just to preserve one person's influence, which would of course look pretty bad. But with Brady, there's at least like a theoretical plan there with the firing of McDermott, and it's kind of acknowledging maybe too that even if McDermott's a good coach, Brady's too valuable to let go as a head coaching hire to some other team, especially the Ravens or whatever, or whoever in the AFC might challenge them. So the Brady hiring, I think, was a big get for Buffalo and help stabilize what was a projection that all of a sudden it had some question to it after so many years of stability. Now it's just all locked back into the program that they had before. I think Brady pretty clearly is one of the better offensive schemers in the league. I think what happened with him in Carolina was pretty obviously not his fault, and it's almost just for the age that he was at the time, it would almost be impressive regardless of how badly he did as an offensive coordinator.
Yeah, I've made the comparison before of for any of the Parks and Rec heads out there, but Ben Wyatt's shameful past of being the mayor of Icetown in Indiana, and him wanting that to get swept under the rug like that as like a 13-year-old mayor of a city like that. That's sort of what Joe Brady's ascent was like. He was the hottest name out there after the 2019 LSU run, and Panthers make a gamble on him, and yeah, it was a little bit in over his head. So obviously the time in Buffalo has reshaped his image pretty strongly, obviously to the point where they're comfortable with him being the head coach now.
Yeah, and I think even as a 13-year-old mayor, he did a pretty good job in Carolina, because it was still Matt Rule's stupid, awful team. It was Matt Rule's team was bad. There wasn't anything anyone could really do about it, let alone a 28-year-old offensive coordinator. And if you actually look at the numbers of those receivers on that team, it's pretty funny, because DJ Moore, of course, had his numbers, but they had a big year out of all three of Moore, Robbie Anderson, and Curtis Samuel when Teddy Bridgewater was the quarterback. So what other coordinator, 28 or otherwise, could get that result? That was pretty impressive, I thought, of Brady. And in any case, he's done a really good job with Buffalo, and I don't know. I think they have defensive questions that they invite when you get rid of a schemer like Sean McDermott, who's definitely one of the best, in my opinion. And the Bills' defense might get meaningfully worse, but I guess we'll see. We'll test the sort of the premise of a quarterback overrules everything else or whatever. They're about to have to prove it. And in the case of Saleh and Tennessee, it's almost more just Brian Daboll, the fantasy headline there. It's like, who cares about Saleh running that defense? Sure, make the defense good. What else are you here for? But we don't really care. It's more about Brian Daboll and that offense. And I think Brian Daboll has gotten a pretty unfair deal with the Giants. I think Joe Shane basically did a scapegoating consolidation move himself by firing Daboll. But unlike Beane, I don't think Joe Shane has any sort of plan or ability to plan. So I think this is kind of just a freebie for the Titans, and I'm optimistic that Cam Ward will at least get maybe the offense around him won't be close to good yet. They need to add a little more experience and ability at receiver, I think, and ideally upgrade the offensive line at least a couple spots. But Cam Ward with Brian Dable is something I can get optimistic about. Or at least we'll say top 24 fantasy quarterback optimistic as a starting point. And if they get an actual decent pass catching and blocking infrastructure around him, I think Ward could really benefit quickly from Dable. So that's good to see. And sorry, Monken, the Cleveland thing is just bizarre. I looked away for like 12 hours and kind of missed some drama involving, and I don't even understand the order of events or authority exactly, other than that it's like Haslam keeps intervening, and this has been a overarching issue for the Browns, of course, throughout their weird descent, ongoing theme of struggles, where I don't know how to judge Andrew Berry or whatever. Yes, it's kind of odd that he's been employed in this job so long, but when the ownership is so meddling and kind of certainly not in a helpful way, I don't know what to make of Berry or the Schwartz event.
Yeah, like Schwartz was kind of a non-negotiable from my understanding, where like they had all these interviews, and like one sticking point seemed to be that like no matter what you do, like if you take this job, there's Jim, he's gonna run the defense, and
Yeah.
if you're the Browns, Schwartz has been awesome. I mean, I think that they have a lot of talent on that defense, but I think also like he really has done a great job with that defense in his own right. So I understand, but I think I also would be like, if I'm the Browns, it's like it is a coordinator. Like Jim Schwartz is not Myles Garrett. He's not Mason Graham.
Right.
Like if that's like the big thing standing in the way of a head coach that can really kind of get things turned back around, then I feel like Schwartz would be a fine enough guy to kind of jettison in that deal. But they got that end of it without really like getting their first candidate, of course, right? Because Schwartz is not going to stick around as a result of this. And yeah, I think Monken even wants him to, but I think that there's too much kind of bad blood now all of a sudden. So,
well, they probably weren't exactly transparent with him. They probably misled Schwartz at some point or another about like, oh yeah, we got your back for sure on this. And it's kind of funny if they drove off options with that insistence, or even just that they made any kind of insistence at all to coaches. Like I bet there were some candidates who were sort of more as like, we think Jim Schwartz would be a good defensive coordinator, but we don't want to work for a team where there's this kind of meddling going on. So we're just going to stay away anyway. And it might not have even been about Schwartz for many or any of the otherwise viable candidates, but it does almost seem like the Monken hiring might be a retreat hiring that they have to make because they might have driven off some other candidate with this Schwartz demand that doesn't even hold in light of the Monken hiring. And Monken as an offensive coordinator is one thing, and maybe not even that much in that. He was better than Greg Roman in Baltimore, but that doesn't mean a whole lot to me. I think there's probably upwards of 25 offensive coordinators every year who are better than Greg Roman. So I don't really know what to make of Monken's ability to turn around the Browns as an organization, or just as far as maximizing the personnel they have on hand. I'm kind of skeptical on both fronts. And yeah, I don't think you've ever gone wrong betting kind of the under on the fortunes of the Browns and the under on their ability to kind of manage as an organization, starting at the top. And why would this guy, Todd Monken of all people, be the one who rights the ship after all the others that have tried already? It doesn't seem likely.
Yeah, I mean, I love Todd Monken. Like, people who listen to the show, they know I went to Georgia. They know I like the Ravens.
The Georgia thing, yeah.
So
see, I'm a better Baltimore Ravens fan than you, as not even a Baltimore Ravens fan, because I'm like, oh no, that guy, he's bad because he, well, he didn't call the offense quite right for the Ravens, but you're just such a Georgia
slappy
apologist. Yeah, slappy. You're like, oh no, that's okay, that's fine.
I do blame Monken for the 23 AFC Championship game
And
against the
Keaton Mitchell,
Chiefs.
John, you're just gonna forget about Keaton Mitchell, that
Yeah, so
abuse
I
that
was
Todd
getting
Monken's
tired
about to do?
of Monken's act by the end of this year as a Ravens fan, as the
Yeah.
intoxication of the Georgia Natties of the early part of the decade wore off a little bit, but he just never really struck me as like a head coach type of guy. Like it
Right.
seemed like
He's
he
more like
had
a
kind of settled
laboratory
into.
guy.
Yeah, like I felt like he was at his best. Just like when he was at Georgia, like I don't think he was like overly involved in a lot of the recruiting processes. Like he was not like a grinder on the trail or anything like that. He was just like, okay, get me some guys to work with, and I'm gonna make it happen, type of guy. More and so him being a head coach. I mean, being a head coach at the NFL level is a different beast than being a college head coach. But regardless, like it just felt to me more like his natural stasis is that of an offensive coordinator who can just dial stuff up.
Yeah, and he may well be quite good at that, even if I don't agree with some of the theories that he committed to with the Ravens offense. It's just probably the case that the Browns need a lot more than that. So
Sure.
I don't even mean it as like a criticism of Monken when I say I don't think this is going to work. It's more just maybe this is cursed, forsaken land, and maybe it's just hubris to think you can walk into it and walk out.
It's hard to argue that. I mean, their best run since coming back into the league in what 99 was a couple of Baker Mayfield years, and one of them making the
Did
playoffs and
did they have like
beating the
a wild
Steelers.
card game with Kelly Holcomb or something
They
like
sure
that?
did.
Like,
Also against
oh
the
my god.
Steelers.
Oh my god. So that's yeah, hopefully they can get to Kelly Holcomb against in the wild card round against the Steelers kind of peaks again.
If I can, listeners can fact check me on this one, but I think after that game was like the absolutely insane 49ers Giants game that ended on like a missed field goal
Oh
that
yeah, there
came
was
up short.
snowballs. That's one of the funniest NFL clips ever because yeah, the snowballs thing was crazy, and there was the thing where Jeremy Shockey was taunting was like doing a dance and like raising the
Yeah,
roof at the sideline and like doing finger guns at the sideline and stuff and being like, "Yeah, we won!" Ha 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 ha! And then the field goal gets missed, or what was it, a botched snap or something? I can't remember.
yeah. It was snap. It was botched. So the holder, I think, had to like roll out and try to throw a bomb to the long snapper or something. Now that we're talking about it.
Was that the Junkin incident? Anyway, yeah. So
Yeah, that's the name.
Shockey, yeah. So Shockey is like going like ha 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 and doing like the Cartman thing at the crowd, and that someone's like, dude, it didn't work, and he turns around and just goes, what? And it's one of the best earnest, not staged videotapings, video evidence of someone's just incredible public embarrassment, an incredible high and low in such a brief snapshot.
Yeah, to tie it back to '03, that would have been made for a great Southwest Airlines want to get away type of
Oh yeah,
commercial premise. But
Shockey. So much good
enough about
content.
enough about the '02 New York Football Giants. I think that covers our coaching recap pretty well. Onto the draft. Onto the draft. So you've gotten in the lab yourself recently, getting yourself caught up on these prospects. Um, I think a lot has been made of the quarterback class or lack thereof, especially when you get beyond Mendoza. But I'm going to kind of ask you live on air here, like which position group do you want to focus on? Do you want to just focus on like the top five or six like dynasty type of picks that we're going to be looking at in rookie drafts, or do you want to like just tackle a position in full?
Uh, I guess we could just. So if we're going at a position, it would be either running back or receiver. I don't think there's enough at quarterback to, I don't know, maybe 90 seconds or so at the quarterback position, and then there's some interesting tight ends. But if we're going to stick to one position, it should probably be running back or receiver.
Okay, all right. We will get into
Running back,
running
maybe. I
backs.
don't
Yeah, we'll
know.
do that because I think that there's a lot. It's obviously a massively important part of your fantasy roster construction, your dynasty roster construction, and so on. Before we dive in there fully, though, I do want to get like a quick snippet on your thoughts on Mendoza and like the
Yeah.
sort of gap between him and the rest of this class.
Right. So I, of course, am kind of like an opponent of taking quarterbacks where they tend to go these days. I think it's point blank. It's shenanigans. I don't support it. I don't think there's anything good about it. However, in a class built like this one, which is not particularly good, there's no depth. There's not really any star power either. There's some guys that, of course, will be stars in this draft. It's the longer shot profiles that'll have to make it, and there are longer shot profiles in every draft. What's in most other drafts, but not this one, is some semblance of depth or obvious star candidates, and it's just not there. So Mendoza really might be the closest thing to a potential star player in this draft, or a player you'd grade near that range conventionally. And particularly given the inflation, even I think it's a no-brainer that the Raiders should take Mendoza at 1. And it's
Right.
not because I think Mendoza is necessarily as good as some other quarterbacks who went later than, so Drake May, for instance. I don't think Mendoza is particularly close to Drake May as a prospect. Still, the Raiders should definitely take Mendoza. So as far as what Mendoza actually is, he could be quite good. I think it's a little difficult to tell how he would handle the NFL, in that in the college game, Mendoza never really had to, or at least at Indiana, he didn't have to throw much at all.
Right.
He did extremely well when he did, to like ridiculous, automatic extents, huge plays that were working at a like 75% clip, and just clearly dominating in a way that, although he did not put up big volume, or that he was not asked to throw very much at Indiana, he almost certainly could have thrown the ball a lot more and still held up. Whereas, as an example of the bad case of how this can go, JJ McCarthy at Michigan, in hindsight, we have reason to believe now, if he had to throw the ball more, if he had to get exposed more, thrown more into the open field, he might have wilted for it. He might have all of a sudden looked worse for it. Mendoza's numbers don't really hint at that kind of concern. Even though
No.
the affirmative has not been proven, the negative doesn't seem very likely. So I think he should run better than average. I don't know how well. I don't think he's as fast as Drake May, but there's like the power, the instinct of running he definitely has. And I guess I'd expect Mendoza to run for at least 350, maybe more than 400 yards most years, with a good chance for some short range touchdowns, as you've seen. And as a passer, he really could, I think, be able to scale up to something like 35 plus pass attempts per game. So I do think Mendoza has pretty significant fantasy upside, in addition to being the obvious pick for the Raiders.
Yeah, I love Mendoza. I love his story. Being an under recruited guy. I mean, if you paid attention to the college football playoff and the national championship, he's from Miami. Didn't get recruited to Miami. Goes to Cal. Has a really good year there a couple of years back, and then goes to Indiana and obviously elevates them to a 16-0 season. Like you were saying, he wasn't throwing the ball a ton, but there was like the magnitude of each throw was crazy. I mean, like at one point in the CFP, when they had played Alabama and Oregon, he had more touchdown passes than incompletions. And Indiana, by and large this year, was just stuffing teams into lockers. Like they didn't have to like risk Mendoza throwing it a bunch of times and potentially getting hit and stuff. Like whereas I think the McCarthy or not comp, but like parallel is really interesting because I think that there were only like 4 games in which McCarthy like had to throw it 30 plus times, and the numbers weren't particularly good in those games. Like Mendoza is definitely game to keep it going for as much as is as asked of him. So he's really impressive. He's got, your prototypical frames, 6'5", 225, something like that. He can run a little bit. So I think he projects really well. I think, like you're saying, it's probably more of a discussion of like, where would he have fit in the 2024 draft class with Caleb, with Drake May, with Jaden Daniels, Nix, and so on. I think that he'd be right in that mix with Caleb and May. Like you're saying, probably a little bit behind Drake May. But, I think that we're talking about that caliber of guy as opposed to a Cam Ward or a Jackson Dart or stuff like that, where more accommodations need to be made. Or, in Ward's case, we just sort of have an incomplete grade on him after 1 year. But I'm a big Mendoza
I would put
guy. He's
Mendoza
goofy.
ahead of Ward, and even without the hindsight of as far as the hindsight on Ward goes, it's almost more favorable than not. But I'd still rank Mendoza ahead of him.
Yeah, I would as well. I'm a big believer in his. You just kind of hope that the Raiders don't mess us up. We were talking about cursed grounds earlier, talking about the Browns.
Real quick, going back to the coaching subject, if they hire Clint Kubiak, maybe the Raiders would be kind of like a fake team. Maybe they'd only put up points on offense and not have the broader acumen, the defense, the special teams to be a winning team. But as long as Clint Kubiak is there with the Raiders, I would consider Mendoza, I don't know, maybe a top 20, top 18 fantasy quarterback as a rookie.
Yeah, I'd be right there with you on that. So really, he's tier of his own by a long shot, I feel like, in this class. And we'll get into some of the other guys a little bit later, but we just kind of wanted to establish that Mendoza is probably the only guy with a legit first round grade. It just feels like the other ones, like your Ty Simpsons, Carson Becks, Garrett Nussmeyers, and so on, Drew Allers, like those are more guys that if they get drafted in the first round, it's at the end of the first round, and it's probably a pretty big mistake by whomever is doing it with any like real expectations. So I think a similar argument is being made as far as the running backs go in this class. Like it feels like there's Jeremiyah Love from Notre Dame and everyone else. And Jeremiyah Love, I think he's deserving of that label right now. I mean, he's a guy that you flip on the Notre Dame games and he's just running away from the defense. And you saw it each of the last 2 years. I mean, his game against Indiana in the CFP last year in South Bend, where he just peels off like the 97-yard run, just so blazing fast. Got a little bit dinged up with his knee during that playoff. I think maybe even during that game. Had also against Penn State, like one of the craziest 2-yard runs for a touchdown that you'll ever see. Like, I don't know how many tackles he broke in that one, but Notre Dame fans that are listening, I'm sure would be able to tell you. But, he's 6 foot, 214 or so. I think that, he's going to run in the low 4.4s at worst. I think he's just got a pretty complete game. I think that he has a chance of going in the top 15 this year. And as long as he doesn't get the Genty problem, which was less about Genty and more about where he landed and where that team was in its relative window, where it's like the Raiders needed a lot more than a running back. I think that you have a more favorable range this year as far as teams maybe drafting from like 7 to 15 or so, where it's like, they probably could, like, there's enough else there, like I think the Chiefs have obviously kind of come out in our fantasy wish casting as a team that it's like, oh, that'd be awesome if he was on the Chiefs. Can you imagine that? But there are other teams as well that I think it would make sense to kind of buck the trend of running backs in the first round are a bad idea, and pointing to a guy like Genty in the year that he had last year, which again I don't believe was his fault.
Right. I do not blame. I insist that no one blame Genty for what happened last year. I think he's pretty clearly blameless. And yet, as you said, we saw how it still could go wrong for him when it's the true worst case scenario, which it truly was. It can be bad enough to derail pretty much any running back. And Jeremiyah Love is not particularly close to Genty's caliber, in my opinion. And yet, Jeremiyah Love is still, in my opinion, pretty clearly good. I do have durability concerns about him, though. I worry that while he'll clearly be explosive, and while he actually runs tough with plenty of power, Love is not really built to take that many hits on a football field because his center of gravity is a little higher than you'd like. I worry that he's actually going to measure in something like 6'1" and 3/8 or something rather than 6 foot 214, and I could still see it being 214 or something. That's a thresh. That 6 foot 214, I believe, was pretty close or exactly the threshold of Zach Charbonnet. And not to say he's had injury issues in the NFL for how kind of high he's built, but he has been nicked up at various points even before the ACL tear. The ACL tear is more of a freak thing, but when your game is kind of running through the middle of the field and taking a lot of hits like Charbonnet, it can pop up as a little bit of a concern. And there's another worst case scenarios that you can think of. Is this is actually a pretty close dimensional comparison, I think, to Love, but Ryan Matthews got hurt a lot in the NFL, and he was kind of one of these upright guys, even though he could, he could run like hell, but he just kind of would get these ankle issues and uh, whatever else. So I'm hoping that Jeremiyah Love at least runs smart in the NFL. I hope he doesn't do the Des Bryant thing where he fights for yardage that he 100% cannot get, and he's just going to get hurt trying to get it, kind of thing. Oh, Bentley remembers Des Bryant, and he also wishes he hadn't snapped his ankle against the Colts or whatever game that was. But I think Love in this draft doesn't have much competition. So even though I would sort of feel more comfortable taking Jordan Love in the early second round than I would in the top 15 in this draft, I don't know. I guess you're just taking him in the top 15. What else are you gonna do? There's nothing interesting here, really.
I'm going to ask you to continue to filibuster while my dog continues to
sorry.
flip out for a second.
So, but yeah, none of that meant to sound backhanded to Love, because I think as from scrimmage with the ball or as a in space threat as a route runner, whatever, he's dangerous with the football. And in addition to Ryan Matthews, Derek McFadden's another kind of player in this genre that I think you see them. They're great athletes, and when they're healthy, they're capable of quite a lot of damage from scrimmage, including as a pass catcher. And yet they kind of got undermined by injuries in their careers. I think the only way you can really protect Love from that outcome is committing to a limited workload as a ball carrier, and especially between the tackles. So yeah, maybe it gives away a little bit of your play calling intentions if he's on the field, but he can threaten with power. It's not that the power isn't there in his running; it's more the volume concern. So you can show a power look with Jeremiyah Love if the defense is not being honest about it, and you can make them pay a pretty high price for it. He can split those safeties up the middle if you're not defending the middle, but you'd prefer to send Jeremiyah Love more where there's open field that he can leverage, where there's more likely to be a one-on-one tackling situation because the defender's in a bad spot if that happens. I keep comparing Love to Travis Etienne for all these reasons. Etienne didn't have the high build concern. It was more just kind of like he takes hits like a wide receiver, even though he's not a wide receiver, and even though he's not built like a wide receiver exactly. And I don't mean that as a criticism of Etienne. That's just kind of how like his body weight is distributed. It's like he's not built like a fire hydrant. That's the ideal. We want every running back to look exactly like Maurice Jones-Drew if we have the option, and unfortunately there just aren't many of those, as it turns out.
True. I think that you bring up a lot of good points, especially on the durability. Let's see, this year he had 3 games with at least 20 carries, had one with 19, never had more than 200 carries in a season. So unlike Genty, where we were pushing like 300 carries a couple times at Boise State, like this is a guy who
Notre Dame managed him pretty well, I think.
Yes, and they also were justified in doing so. And this is becoming more in vogue in college football, generally speaking. Like we're going to see that time and time again, where if you are spending a decent amount of money on your running back room, like you're going to make sure that both of them are involved. So like Jadarian Price was plenty involved, or when Penn State brought in Nick Singleton and Katron Allen, it's like it makes sense. You took these big swings in NIL and stuff to get these guys. Got to use them both, or else they're going to transfer. So like those committees are becoming more in vogue. I think tying off my point as far as the upper range of potential draft capital for Jeremiyah Love. I think you look at Washington at 7, New Orleans at 8, Kansas City at 9, maybe even Dallas at 12. Is like if Love is going to go high in this draft, I think that I would not pan any of those teams for making that pick necessarily.
Yeah, I not that I feel strongly about it, but in the first round mock draft I projected Love falling all the way to 16, I think it was, where the Jets have their Colts selection, I believe. And
Okay.
I really think that could happen because in the top 10, you got guys like Sonny Styles barely fitting in. There's a handful of players who I see projected in the 12-15 range in a lot of mock drafts who I think are more so going to push for the top 10. So in part because I believe NFL teams will share the concern that this is not a Bijan Robinson case. This is not an Omarion Hampton. This is not a Genty where you can put 20 carries on him. We don't want to spend the salary that it takes at the slot that it would be to pick him. And instead, we're going to go with whatever, an offensive tackle, a defensive lineman, a defensive tackle, those kind of some corner maybe. But I think Love to the Jets would work out fine, or as long they'd probably be too stupid of a team to preserve him. But I don't expect the Jets to re-sign Breece Hall, for instance. So I think if it's specifically upside you're chasing, like theoretical fantasy upside, even if it's not likely, even if it's not practical, Love to the Jets would work just fine in my opinion, because they still have Isaiah. Yeah, so maybe they'd be smart enough to give Davis some reps. That would be a really good backfield for the Jets, in my opinion, getting like 14 carries to Love, 10 to Davis, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, with how far away they seem to be at quarterback, I think stocking that running back room would make a lot of sense. I think my dog just threw up on the couch, so
Oh God,
got
I'm
something to
sorry.
look forward to after the
Ugh.
show here.
Do you want
That's
me to
awesome.
do like all the listeners can just die of boredom and I'll talk for 20 minutes while you clean the couch?
It will only take me a minute if you can
Oh, okay.
spare it. Let's see. I mean, would you care to talk about like that next
I can
tier,
just keep going
like
on the
who's
running
in
backs. Yeah.
who's in the running between 2 and 5? I'm going to step away just briefly here.
Okay, cool. So I think a lot of rankings you'll see right now will mention as high as running back 2 Jadarian Price, the other Notre Dame running back that John mentioned, and it's pretty interesting that Notre Dame backfield, the split between those two players. As athletic as Jeremiyah Love is, and Love could be the best all-around tester at running back in this draft, Jadarian Price looks pretty fast. He looks maybe low 4.4, high 4.3 kind of fast. Not to say he can't do better than that. Even I'm often surprised by 40 times in either direction. But Price looks fast, like the kind of fast that everybody on defense or special teams, as it were. He's a very good kick returner at Notre Dame. They sort of pause when they see Jadarian Price get to second, third stride because they realize they've not calibrated the speed correctly and they got to reset their angle to the oh crap version of it, that they the oh he's going to be faster than I thought angle. And because of the workload split between Love and Price is specifically untested as a pass catcher. We don't know whether he's bad or good or somewhere in between as a pass catcher, because Notre Dame specifically allocated the pass catching running back task to Jeremiyah Love, as if almost to say, well, Jadarian Price as a runner is picking up the slack that we don't want to put on Love. The carries 15 through 25 that we could put on Love, we don't. We give it to Price, and we don't want to give Price too much more as a pass catcher because we need him as a kick returner. So again, as a kick returner, Price was very good. So if that was the sort of trade-off that Notre Dame had in mind, then for the NFL, the equation could change pretty quickly for Jadarian Price on whatever team he's on, because if Jadarian Price can catch passes, we already know he's good, or some version of good, as a runner. We know as a kick returner he can definitely help. But if that team that drafts Jadarian Price makes a different conclusion than Notre Dame, if they decide, well, we'll just have Jadarian Price also catch passes too, then at that point Jadarian Price has a pretty high fantasy ceiling and floor both himself. So there's a lot to be determined about Price and what teams see him as, what his upside in the NFL might be. Like, even though he didn't catch passes at Notre Dame, that doesn't mean he can't in the NFL. Plenty of players didn't catch passes at running back in the in college, and then did in the NFL. If Price is one of those guys, he could rank really high. But for now, I have Jadarian Price kind of lumped into a really an inclusive, cowardly tier 2 that I'm keeping a lot of players in while I wait.
I'm back, by the way.
Yeah, sorry, you screwed up though. Now I can't shut up. Now I gotta keep going. So like the rest, but I'll be quick. The rest of this tier, this tier 2 at running back, you might call it, in no particular order. I've got Jonah Coleman from Washington/Arizona, Nick Singleton from Penn State. I know I can hear the booing already. I don't care.
Yeah.
And Emmett Johnson from Nebraska. And John, here's the one that'll really get the boos get louder. Dean Connors of Houston and Rice.
They're not going to boo you.
Like
they don't know who that is.
Well, then I'm booing them, because you should know. Good. You should know who. Let me look up his name again. Dean Connors is. He played at Houston and Rice or something.
And he was pretty awesome. I loved him in fantasy this year, in fantasy best ball and all that good stuff. Like he was printing for Houston. He was really, really good. So I'm definitely interested in him and seeing how, his draft process plays out. I think, tying off your point on Jadarian Price, the sort of Robin to Jeremiyah Love's Batman at Notre Dame. Yeah, we just have, like how many times do we have to do this where the pass catching sample is just not big enough to have a real opinion on? Because he had, let's see, 13 total targets the last 2 years. Last year, 4 catches for 10 yards. Oh, he's bad. This year, 6 catches on 7 targets for 87 yards and 2 touchdowns. Oh, he must be great. Like there's just no real way, like, like with Kenneth Walker, I guess a couple of years ago would be like the example of just like, we don't know one way or the other if he's going to be good at it. And therefore, like, I think it's unfair to make a harsh judgment one way or the other as far as what his ultimate skill set is. But I do believe that from just a pure runner perspective, Price is definitely someone who I think is probably worth a top 50, 60 type of pick.
Yeah, and if we want to keep going with remembering some guys and going back to the Darren McFadden kind of comparison for Jeremiyah Love, that would make Jadarian Price the Felix Jones, because Felix Jones was also like big play guy, kick returner guy at Arkansas. But and in a draft this week, I mean, I don't want to curse the guy, but Jadarian Price might crash the end of the first round if he runs a 4.38 at 212 pounds. I'm just naming numbers that would that would qualify as sufficient. I'm not trying to think of specifics, but if he did that in the class this week, there could be some team that's at the end of the first round that's just sort of reasoning, we already have our volume guy. Our offense is good. We're close to winning one. We just need a big play, firecracker off the bench and on special teams. And if some team convinces themselves of that, Price really could at least the top 40. He could crash.
Yeah. So keep an eye on him. We do have a super chat from our guy Fantasy Meatball. Great to have you on. I think that profile picture with our own Jim
If it's Michael, sorry if we can't remember correctly, but yeah, thanks, man. Good to see you.
Met him at the Fishbowl this year. Great dude. Of course. So he's in a playoff challenge, and he's down by a considerable amount, 32 points. We got to pick. So this is a contest where you have to actually make lineup decisions, that's hardcore. For
I assume
the
it's
playoffs.
A single use kind of thing or something like that. I don't know.
Must be.
Okay.
But he needs to start 2 of the following: Kayshon Boutte, Cooper Kupp, Kyle Williams, or AJ Barner. So 2 of those guys.
Yeah, this is tough for me to think through because these guys all have similar projections for me, and there's volatility in there. I'm going May over Sam Darnold for sure. It's the other part that I'm more so, because Barner's tough a little bit, because so much of his utility is as a blocker, including as a pass blocker, a guy who helps on the edge. But I don't know how much Barner is going to need to help on the edge. Even if Harold Landry's back, let's just assume Harold Landry's back. The Patriots' edge rush is not very good. Their second best edge rusher might be this undrafted rookie free agent Elijah Ponder. If it's Kalavon Chason, that's just not a very good pass rush. So Barner has shown in PPR the ability to be kind of like a reception spammer. He can catch 6 or more passes in a game. Maybe it's not.
You think that's like an area that they can kind of attack this Patriots defense? Obviously, their corners are pretty well regarded.
Yeah, I do think it's tough for me. I don't really know enough about how the Patriots have gotten the results they have, but their coverage results have been pretty good in that part of the field. That the safety Hawkins has had a good year. I never was that impressed with him in the past, so I don't know what to make of that, though. In any case, I think Barner will be involved, and the lack of the edge rush for the Patriots just kind of encourages that, because we know Barner's going to be on the field. If he doesn't need to block as much as he might otherwise, then that just seems to just be it can only go up kind of thing. But you're maybe trading a little bit of upside there. The reason I don't go straight to Barner, though, for sure, is even though he hasn't done anything all year, I think Cooper Kupp could be involved in the slot. Marcus Jones is a really good corner, but he's 5'8", 180 or something. So if they think Kupp can, throw an elbow at him and run him over in the slot, that might be something they go to. But so how about this? If the other guy is picking Barner, that might be a little more reason to consider Kupp. If the other guy does not have Barner, maybe let's go with Barner and Butte, I guess.
Yeah, always good. Always going to give the thumbs up for Butte. But yeah, I think you thought that through well there. So best of luck, Michael. Hope the
thanks
Patriots
a lot, man.
Can put up.
Whoops. Sorry, he just said he won't know the other person's lineup. Let's maybe just err toward Barner unless we get intel. If the other person posts or something their lineup, then you can readjust.
Well, best of luck regardless. Hope the Patriots can give you some garbage time. All right, moving back over to the running backs, but actually before then, why don't we grab a note from our friends over at Dabble. Dabble isn't just another DFS app. It's the ultimate social platform where you can connect with other fantasy football and fantasy sports lovers. Dabble lets you win big. You can win up to 5,000 times your money this football season. Starting with Dabble is easy. New users get $25 free when signing up. No deposit necessary. Check out the link in the episode description below to download Dabble now. All right. So we just kind of tied off the Notre Dame backfield. You invited the booze with the Nick Singleton. Let's talk about Nick Singleton and Kaytron Allen. Both very interesting guys. They came in, I believe, with Drew Aller, and obviously they made the college football semifinals last year. This year was a complete disaster that obviously ended with James Franklin getting fired after they lost to UCLA as like a 30-something point favorite. So year just kind of went off the rails for Penn State by and large. Nick Singleton was actually the bigger recruit between the two of them. Both of them were highly rated. Singleton might have been the only 5-star running back recruit in his class. Both of them had tons of touchdowns this year. Kaytron Allen had 15 touchdowns, but he also had 210 carries, 1,300 yards, whereas Singleton was used a lot more sparingly, only 123 carries for him this past year, averaged under 4.5 yards per carry, but did punch in those 13 scores. Overall, like Singleton kind of had like a weird pattern essentially established as far as his production went at Penn State. Amazing freshman year, over 1,000 yards, kind of a dud as a sophomore, 4.5 yards a carry on 171 attempts. Then the following year, basically the same amount of carries, goes for 1,099 yards and 12 touchdowns. And then again, 13 touchdowns this past year. So he becomes this interesting case where I think that people ascribe like a certain expectation to guys that are rated as 5 stars. And when it maybe isn't quite as obvious on the field during college, people can say that he's like washed already. So why do we need to still believe in one Nick Singleton?
It's not so much that you need to believe in him. I also have questions about him. The way his college career unfolded was pretty odd and certainly warrants a little inspection. Like, is it truly outside of his control that it went this way, or is there something odd in him or his history that could explain this? Because if there's things like that out there, you want to know. And I don't, in the meantime, know why his numbers fluctuated quite this way. But one thing that so it's a couple things that make Singleton interesting to me still, despite the way it went. The draft class is weak in dynasty drafts, especially. I'm very interested in Singleton, especially if everybody else hates him, because I think he's one of the few players who projects for a pretty clear vision of utility at the NFL level from scrimmage. Now, given the volatility of Singleton's rushing production year to year, especially, but also sometimes game to game, it indicates that there's probably some hitch in his, I don't know, processing, maybe something about he's just not good on zone runs, but is good on power runs. And Penn State kind of went to more zone runs this year, something like that, I think is the explanation. Because to me, Singleton is clearly better than Allen, especially as a fantasy asset going into the NFL. If only because Allen, not to say he can't A, improve, and B, maybe, that not that he can't be better than I'm assuming he is, but Katron Allen's pass catching production at Penn State was just kind of bad. So I think we can conclude, or at least take for likely in Allen's case, he's probably not a good NFL receiver. He's probably below average as a receiver in the NFL level. With Singleton, as a pass catcher, he's clearly some version of good. And if you have good hands, and if you're a reliable passing down pass catcher guy, as a 220-pound running back who runs a sub 4.4, I'm sorry, I guess that's enough for me. I don't really need to know the other stuff, and I don't, unless it's just a horror story, I don't really care what the details are. And the other reason I think to sort of give some grace, give some leeway to Singleton on his rushing volatility is, even at his lowest points, he was still pretty good, averaging 4.5 yards per carry with 21 touchdowns to 294 attempts is really fine. The touchdown volume especially hints at shortened fields on these carries, which in some cases almost entirely explains the yards per carry fluctuation. In some of these plays where he's getting touchdown number 11 on the year, but only 450 yards. Well, if that wasn't a 5-yard touchdown, if he got that carry at the 20, it might have been an 80-yarder for all you know, because he did do that in some other cases. You look at the two big years that Singleton had as a runner, 6.4 yards per carry, still 12 touchdowns on 170 carries, 6.8 yards per carry, still 12 touchdowns on 156 carries. He got the kill shot a lot of times in on the defense, and it's sort of been lost in this the enduring narrative on him, because there was inconsistency, and there were these points, like you mentioned, where you get the hopes up, you'd get the hype, you'd believe it, and then he let you down, and you sort of cling to that the burned feeling, and let that cloud the broader picture, which is also, over the course of his career, Singleton's rushing production is just plain old good. It's not great. You'd certainly like to have seen him be more consistent and get better volume, sure. But particularly if John, if you imagine the chronology, the sequencing of his years at Penn State, people would change their opinions about Singleton if you just took the two worst seasons. So last year in 2023, if you said this was his freshman and sophomore year, this year 2022 is his junior year, this year 2024 is his senior year, people would go, oh crap, this guy's awesome. Yeah, he started a little slow, but who cares? Look at these years. This is crazy. Andy's fast. Andy catches. That's more the way I see it.
Interesting. And interesting little nugget here. Just pulled it up over on CFB stats. All 13 of his touchdowns were in red zone touchdowns this year.
Right, and we know he has the long range speed. So I imagine Penn State went to Katron Allen. So the defense to Katron Allen is he probably is more reliable as a runner from play to play than Singleton. Singleton probably is more hit or miss than Allen, but the hit with Singleton is pretty much all I care about.
Fair. And I think in a class like this, looking a little bit past the box score, not that you shouldn't do that anyway, and just kind of looking at the tools and the context there, particularly important with the guy like Singleton, because I think he is talented. It just, you can be a little bit confused on how the career unfolded, but ultimately I think that there's like that upside case that could be, fairly significant. So our guy wants to know, where would you take Singleton in a rookie draft?
So this is the tough one to answer just for that. I don't know what the ADP is right now. I'd imagine it's pretty it's so preliminary right now too that I imagine it's not settled. I'd imagine there's a lot of fluctuation from draft to draft, and people are testing out the market a little bit, seeing what they can get away with. I, for instance, maybe would be a little greedy about Singleton and try to get him at some point in, I don't know, mid second round if I can. I don't want to take Singleton in the first if I don't have to, even though I think he probably is going to end up a top 12 overall dynasty player for me in this draft. If the public thinks Katron's better, which I just fully reject, then I'd try to have my cake and eat it too, and maybe try to get Singleton more in the second round. But if you see intel, if you see other drafts happening right now that say Singleton's like a top 10 pick, you got to take him in the top 10 or you're not going to get him. Admittedly, more 10 than higher than that. I don't want to go higher than that. I want to take at 10 the player who's conventionally valued at 10. If let's say it's Jadarian Price, I want to take, in that case, Price at 10 and Singleton in the second round, even if I have to trade up a little bit to get him.
Yeah, I think that's a fair way to kind of map it out. Allen, yeah, he arguably had as good of a college career as Singleton, and obviously, like, 200 carries each of the last 2 years. Like, he was a bigger factor. I'm in kind of a recurring theme that I always come back to once we get into draft season is, like, usually I will implicitly trust that, like, a guy coming from Penn State is going to have crazy workout numbers, but in Allen's case,
I don't
my
think so.
my eyes kind of tell me that I'm worried that he runs like a 4.6 or something.
I think Allen's going to be 5'11", 215 or 220, maybe 215, and he'll probably run like a 4.54 or something. That he'll be fine. But for me, particularly because I'm assuming he's not going to catch many passes in the NFL, I assume he'll be a decent to good runner and unremarkable pass catcher. To me, Katron Allen is more like a third round. Even in this week draft, he's a third round dynasty kind of pick to me, whereas I have Singleton exactly at 12, and I'm hoping I can get him more like, I don't know, as greedy as I can be, but I'm assuming I might need to take him by 15 to be safe or something like that.
All right, let's move on over any other running backs that you wanted to kind of highlight on this here episode.
Just real quickly that with Emmett Johnson and Dean Connors, both the appeal is pass catching specifically. I assume Emmett Johnson is not going to be better than average as a pure runner. He should be fine. We'll see what the athletic testing says about him and Dean Connors, but Dean Connors might be the better athlete of the two. I forgot to look up Emmett Johnson's, if he has any track data out there. But Dean Connors has a little bit of a track history and a lot of a pass catching history, both at Rice and Houston. The rushing production was only okay, but it was at least okay, maybe even good. So if Dean Connors runs something like a 4.47 at 210, and I assume he's going to test really well with the pass catching drills at the combine and stuff, you really might hear his name a little bit, even though I assume he's completely unknown to most people right now. And the other interesting sleeper to me at running back is Seth McGowan of Kentucky, but he was previously at Oklahoma, had some felony arrest, I believe, that led to him getting kicked off the team. But really good player, I think. He's shown something as a pass catcher, shows some motor, some wiggle power as a runner, all those things. So Seth McGowan is my pretty easily my favorite third or maybe even fourth round pick to target, if depending on how much people might be aware of him.
Fascinating. I'd kind of forgotten about Seth McGowan in the grander scheme of things. We got a question, and I wanted to bring him up too. Actually, have you looked at Mike Washington from Arkansas at all?
Not a lot, a little bit though. My concern with him is the sporadic production and the really high build. So it looks like he's supposed to be something like 6'2", 220, and
Yeah.
you can be 6'2" and still be a good running back in the NFL, but generally you have to be someone like Derrick Henry to do it. You need to be you need to be heavy, and you need to be athletic, very athletic. So if Washington tests really well at the combine, that would give me the basis to project more skill set growth, to project improvement in what I would say is otherwise lacking in the meantime from scrimmage production at the college level. But Washington is a part of a large group of players at running back who right now I'm not assuming they get drafted, but if they test well enough in a class this thin, they could very quickly climb the board. In Washington's case, I would more so assume fifth, sixth round kind of ceiling, though.
Yeah, I think that that's fair. He was really productive this past year at Arkansas. I worry that he's a little bit maybe like a Rocket Sanders, where he's just like awesome in college, but not really much in the
Hey
pros.
man,
I mean,
I'm not throwing away cashing in whatever you call it my truther card on but that is a good example to raise, because Raheem Sanders went undrafted and was somewhat invisible as a rookie, even though he pretty much torched the SEC for two different teams as a runner and a receiver. He torched in the SEC. So Washington, it's there's just a lot riding on the athletic testing when you haven't shown that much on tape or in the box score yet.
right, and he is a guy who played 5 years in college, but between let's see here,
Did he change
Buffalo,
positions?
New Mexico State, and Arkansas. I'm not sure if he
He has the
changed
build of a
positions or
former
not.
quarterback or former receiver, but I didn't
That's
investigate.
funny. We can look into that further, but just kind of like isolating the sample on our very useful, by the way, combine database
Yes,
plugins, guys that are 6'2" and 220 or more. It's other than Derrick Henry, not a
there's
ton
Chris
of
Brown from
success stories.
Colorado. Yeah.
You got Ollie Gordon, Alfred Blue, remember him?
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
Chris Warren, vaguely, Hassan Haskins, Kalel Mullings, Josh Adams from Notre Dame, of course.
And he was a really
And
productive player in college, mind you, Josh Adams. That's another reason why the high build is such a problem for a running back, because Josh Adams ran all over everybody at Notre Dame, still went undrafted.
yeah, I do remember. Something about the Notre Dame uniform with like the crazy stockings. It makes them look like they run higher than they actually do. I don't know. It's like a visual trick to
He
me.
might have gotten a raw deal. Maybe Josh Adams is shorter than people realize, and it's just unfortunate Mandela effect thing.
Yeah, like Riley Leonard looked like he had like the longest shins in human history when he was at Notre Dame for whatever reason. All right, I think with shin discussion in the books, we've probably covered it on the running backs for this episode. Before we get out of here, though, do want to hear your kind of early leans as far as the Super Bowl are concerned with Seattle and New England squaring off.
I feel like it's kind of a bummer Super Bowl in that I feel like both of these teams are not particularly good, not the general standard I have in mind of a Super Bowl, a Super Bowl berth, and let alone a victory. So I think either of them can win because the bar is lower in general than it usually is, and not to be just critical of them. Both teams are good, so both of them are in the positive sense capable of winning. Neither team is that likely to give it away unless there's uncharacteristic turnover, or maybe you could call it characteristic turnovers in the case of Darnold and the fumbling in the case of May. Sacks are an ongoing concern with the Patriots, less so for the Seahawks, if only because they don't, their offensive line is more developed experience wise. Don't probably need to throw as much as the Patriots probably do to win, but I'm taking the Patriots anyway. And this could easily be wrong because I hold both Mike McDonald and Clint Kubiak in really high regard. I think they're doing basically a perfect job. Although the teams in this game are not as good as I think they should be to be in this game. McDonald and Kubiak have been flawless. Vrabel's done, of course, a great job too. But it's not because I doubt the Seattle coaching, but Darnold relative to May, I think, is a pretty significant gap. And it's not as if Josh McDaniels has done anything less than a really good job as the offensive coordinator for the Patriots. So we have reason to expect really good game planning from both sides. And if the margins really do kind of just trade off on both sides, if it goes that way without wacky stuff like turnovers or Rashid Shaheed touchdown, of course that could actually happen. But unless there's a detail like that makes the difference, I feel like it really does whittle down more and more to like Darnold versus May, which is why I take the Patriots. But the Seahawks absolutely could win. They're plenty worthy of winning the game.
Yeah, there's some disturbing trends about favorites of 4.5 or more points in the Super Bowl. I think the last 7 of them have failed to cover, something like that, and that's where the line sits today here on Thursday, the January 29th. So I think the Patriots at least cover. I'm concerned that they win, but not that I'm like a Seahawks fan necessarily, but.
Mm-hmm. Sorry. Were you saying you think the Seahawks cover?
No.
Oh no.
I think the Patriots cover.
Sorry, the framing there, I couldn't tell like what you feared and what your favorite, where your favoritism lies. I couldn't tell from the framing which side was which, but I think the 4.5 is a lot. I understand. I understand the concern about that. I'm realize I'm arguing against what my own prediction was, but it's just to say, it's like I really do think it's kind of like a coin flip in terms of who wins the game, but on what basis the victory is seized could be a back-breaking touchdown, basically, because I personally am not expecting a high-scoring game, so I could imagine it being the Rashid Shaheed touchdown or Drake May blindside hit because Will Campbell's stubby arms couldn't make the play or whatever, but it really could be some kind of like, oh my God, kind of, the unexpected, the big story that we don't anticipate, but usually happens in these kinds of games. It could happen to either side. I just assume it's more likely to happen against you when your quarterback is Darnold than when it's May.
Well, we know that the script writers, kind of projected this out. If you look at the picture that they put out before the season of, who's marching closest to the stadium there at Levi's, I think May and Darnold were at the front of the line, oddly enough. And also, I think the Shield knows, last year was a blowout. Can't have that again. So I think we're going to get a really close game.
Right. Both defenses are too good and both offenses are just limited enough, in my opinion, that it would be pretty surprising if it was a high scoring game, but whatever. I have no rooting interest. I hope everyone just has a lot of fun and nobody gets hurt.
Fair.
The second thing I'm serious about. I don't hope they have fun. That part I was being ironic.
Yeah.
No fun.
No fun. No fun ever. Let's see here. Yeah, the total is 45.5. So like that implies some scoring. I see this going under as well. If I had to make my picks today, I would take the points of the Patriots and take the under as well. But we'll see how quickly I reverse on that by the time that we record next week for our preview show. So yes, that is right. We will be back next week. We're also going to be rocking this out throughout the entire offseason, a lot more draft talk, best ball draft strategy, that kind of thing here as the offseason unfolds. But that's going to do it for us here on this edition. And if you're not already signed up at RotoWire, please make sure you do that. 15% off any subscription. All you got to do, rotowire.com, use that code YouTube15. We got baseball coming up around the corner, golf. Also, we have tons of really good golf content, golf projections, all that good stuff. So we're more than just a football site. Our hockey, our basketball, top notch as well. So you're going to want to check it out and you're going to want to get 15% off that subscription. Again, use that code YouTube15 when you go to RotoWire. Big thanks to our sponsors over at Dabble and over at Blue Wire. For Mario Puig, I'm John McKechnie. Thanks for listening.